The coat weighs 4 pounds and 2 ounces. I know this because I weighed it once at 3 a.m. on my kitchen scale, and then I put it back in the closet and never told anyone I'd done that. It was February, maybe a year after she died, and I couldn't sleep. I'd been lying on my back staring at the ceiling where the paint had bubbled from the upstairs neighbor's shower leak, and I kept thinking about how the coat felt heavier than any coat should feel. Not dramatically heavier, not like someone had stuffed bricks into the pockets, just heavier. The way a room is heavier when someone has recently been in it and left. So I got up, I took it off the hanger, I put it on the kitchen scale, the cheap one I use for measuring coffee beans, and I watched the digital numbers settle. 4 pounds, 2 ounces. I didn't know what a normal coat weighed. I still don't. I put it back on the hanger. I closed the closet. I went back to bed. That was the closest I ever came to asking it a question. 3 years now. The coat lives in the only closet in my studio apartment, which is less a closet and more a narrow rectangle carved out of the wall where the previous tenant probably stored a vacuum cleaner. It hangs on the same wooden hanger I brought from the Goodwill on Hawthorne when I moved in. It hangs between my rain jacket and a flannel I bought at the PSU bookstore sale. It doesn't belong with either of them. It knows this, I know this, we have an agreement. Every morning I open the closet. Every morning I touch the sleeve. This is not a decision I make. It is a motion my hand performs, the way your hand checks for your phone in your pocket. Muscle memory that has nothing to do with muscles. The wool is navy, double-breasted. Knee length on Halmoni, which means it hits me mid-thigh because she was 5'2" and I got my height from somewhere else. The fabric is good. I don't know fabrics the way she did, but I know this one is good because after 3 years of Portland winters, it still hasn't pilled and the buttons have never come loose. And the stitching along the hem is so precise it looks printed. It wasn't printed, it was her hands. I lifted it off the hanger this morning and held it against my chest for a moment. It smelled the way it always smells, sesame oil and lavender hand cream and something underneath both of those that I have never been able to name. Something like the back room of her shop on Division Street where the bolts of fabric leaned against the wall and the sewing machine hummed and the air tasted like sizing and patience. That smell is weaker now than it was a year ago. I try not to think about that. March in Portland is too warm for a wool coat. I knew that. I almost put it on anyway. I stood in front of the closet in my jeans and my PSU hoodie, and I held it by the shoulders, and I thought about wearing it to campus, and I thought about how the weight of it would feel across my back, like a hand settling there, like someone walking beside me who didn't need to talk. I put it back. I made coffee instead, French press, because the drip machine broke in January and I haven't replaced it. I measured the beans on the same scale, 4 tablespoons. The numbers on the display were smaller this time, less interesting. I ate a granola bar standing at the counter. I checked my phone. 2 texts from David, one from last night asking if I wanted ramen after his shift, one from 6 a.m. saying never mind, he'd crashed early. I typed back a thumbs up and a heart and set the phone down. 7:45, econ at 9. I grabbed my bag off the hook by the door, canvas tote, mechanical pencil tucked in the side pocket, notebook with the green cover. I pulled on my rain jacket. I checked for my keys. I left the closet open. I don't remember deciding to. At the door, I looked back once. Morning light from the kitchen window reached just far enough to catch the edge of the closet. The coat hung still. One sleeve had slipped off the hanger and dangled into the room, the cuff nearly touching the floor. It looked like an arm reaching for something. I closed the door behind me. The Americano was too hot, and my elbow caught the door handle, and that was how a $4.50 coffee changed everything I understood about my mother. I was pushing through the side entrance of Smith Memorial, the one where the door sticks and you have to hip check it while holding whatever you're holding, and my elbow swung wide and knocked the cup sideways. The lid stayed on, which was the wrong kind of luck because the coffee shot out of the drinking hole in a single pressurized arc and went straight down the front panel of the coat. The coat. Halmoni's coat. I'd put it on after all. I don't remember the decision. I remember standing at the door of my apartment, rain jacket already on, and then I was walking to campus and the coat was on me and the rain jacket was in my bag. March or not, wait or not, it was one of those mornings, and now there was coffee, dark, oily, still hot enough to feel through the wool, spreading across the front like a stain on a photograph. I stood in the doorway of Smith Memorial and I did not move. A girl behind me said, asterisk, excuse me, asterisk, and I stepped sideways without looking at her. I touched the stain with 2 fingers. The wool had absorbed it fast, already setting, already becoming part of the fabric, and that was when something in my chest tightened in a way I hadn't felt since the funeral. This was not my coat. This was not something I could throw in the wash with my jeans and my hoodie and call it handled. This was the last physical object my grandmother made with her own hands and gave to me, and I had just poured a $4.50 Americano down the front of it. I couldn't breathe for about 4 seconds. Then I could. Kim's Cleaners on 82nd. I'd passed it 100 times walking to Seoul Bakery for my shifts. The little storefront with the plastic sign and the Korean lettering underneath, Kimse Takso. I'd never been inside. I started walking. The bus took 20 minutes. I sat with the coat folded on my lap, coffee side up, pressing a napkin against the stain that was doing nothing. My mechanical pencil was in my hand. I don't remember taking it out. I was sketching on the napkin's dry corner without thinking about it. A rectangle for the storefront. A smaller rectangle for the counter I'd seen through the window. Proportions wrong, probably. I always sketch spaces I haven't entered yet. I fill in the details after. The bell on Kim's door rang when I pushed it open. The shop was small, fluorescent light, steam from somewhere in the back, Korean radio playing at a volume meant for one person. Behind the counter, a man in a pressed shirt looked up. 50-something, reading glasses, a pen behind his ear the same way I keep my pencil. The sign above the register said Kim Sang-ho, and beneath it, in smaller letters, a name I recognized from Halmoni's world, Inhea. I blinked at it, my Korean name, same characters, different context, just a coincidence, probably asterisk, Inhe, asterisk is a common word. But my hand tightened on the coat. I spilled coffee. I said, it's wool. It was my grandmother's. Mr. Kim took the coat from me the way you take a child's drawing, carefully with both hands. He spread it on the counter and examined the stain, then the collar, then the buttons. He turned it over. He ran his thumb along the inside seam. Good coat, he said. Who made it? My grandmother. She was a seamstress. He nodded. He wrote something on the intake slip in Korean. I could read parts of it, asterisk wool, stain, front panel asterisk, but he wrote fast, and my Korean has always been better spoken than read. I finished my sketch of the floor plan while he worked. The counter was closer to the door than I'd guessed from outside. The pressing machine in the back was bigger. I added a small square for the radio. Mr. Kim glanced at my napkin and said nothing, which I appreciated. 2 days, he said, maybe 3. This fabric is particular. Okay, I folded the napkin into my pocket. I was already late for econ. I was already calculating how fast I'd have to walk to make it by 9:15. Your name? Grace? Grace Park. He wrote it down. I picked up my bag. I was almost out the door when I remembered and turned back. Please be careful with it. He looked at me over his reading glasses. I will. I left. I was late. I was thinking about the econ midterm and the fact that I'd have to text David about dinner and the stain and whether 3 days without the coat would feel like 3 days without something else. I didn't see what happened next. I was already gone, but I imagine Mr. Kim held the coat up to the fluorescent light. I imagine his eyebrows shifted. Not quite a frown, not quite surprise. Something between recognition and a question he was not yet ready to ask aloud.
The guest room had no lock. I noticed this on the first day. It is not the kind of thing you say aloud, that your son's house has no lock on your door, but it is the kind of thing a seamstress notes. I have spent 35 years reading the places where things come apart. Zippers with missing teeth, buttons sewn with thread too thin for the weight they carry. A door without a lock is not an oversight, it is a statement about who the room belongs to. Derek and Megan's house in Beaverton smelled like nothing. I do not mean it smelled clean. I mean it smelled like the absence of a life being lived. No sesame oil darkening in a pan, no fabric sizing, no lavender hand cream worked into the cracks of someone's knuckles at the end of a long day. The hallway had beige carpet and framed photographs of places they had vacationed but never lived. They told me it was for safety. COVID, they said. You are 57, they said, as though I had not been the one who carried my own age this far, who built a shop from a borrowed sewing machine and 17 words of English, and made it last 27 years on Division Street. Derek stood in the kitchen while Megan explained the plan. He held a glass of water he never drank from. I watched his hands. A mother always watches the hands. I knew the shape of what was happening before they finished the first sentence. Not because I am clever, because I am a seamstress. I read patterns, and the pattern of a son who cannot meet your eyes while his wife explains how much safer you will be in their guest room is not a new pattern. It is the oldest one. I will tell you what I lost. because precision matters and I am precise. I lost Eunji's alterations. 27 years. The bell on the door Yunho installed when they opened. The back room where I taught Grace Korean on Saturday mornings. The cutting table I could find in the dark by the way the air moved around it. I lost my phone number, the one Grace had memorized since she was 6. I lost Mrs. Cho on Tuesdays, and Father Park's sermons on Sundays, and the walk to the fabric store on Hawthorne where the owner knew I liked my thread waxed and my needles long. I lost the particular weight of my own keys in my hand. I catalogued these things the way I catalogue a client's measurements, sternum to waist, shoulder to wrist, the distance between what is and what should be. I wrote nothing down. Not yet. A seamstress keeps her measurements in her body until she is ready to cut. The guest room had a single window facing the backyard. A fence, a lawn, a bird feeder no one filled. The bed was a queen, too large for one person and precisely the right size for loneliness. The nightstand held a lamp from Target and a Bible I did not recognize, not mine from the shop, with the cracked spine and the bookmark Junho made from raw silk. A guest Bible I unpacked in 30 minutes. 3 dresses, 2 aprons. Megan had asked why I needed aprons if I wasn't cooking, and I had not answered, because some questions do not deserve the breath. An apron is not about cooking, it is about being ready, it is about having pockets. I opened the closet to hang my dresses and I stopped. My sewing machine was there. The singer I had used for 22 years, the one with the scratch on the throat plate from the night I sewed through a metal button because I was crying too hard to see and too stubborn to stop. Junho's machine, the industrial serger, they had left behind, but the singer was here, tucked behind a vacuum cleaner and a box of Christmas ornaments, as though it were something to be stored. I pulled it forward. I set it on the desk by the window. I plugged it in and pressed the foot pedal once, just once, and the hum filled the room like a held breath releasing. At least they brought this. They did not know they brought me a weapon. In September, they changed my phone number. In October, the church shuttle stopped coming. In November, I realized my social security check was being deposited into an account I had not opened. I will tell you these things the way I would tell you about taking apart a garment, thread by thread, in the order they were cut. A seamstress does not rush the ripping. She notes where each thread was anchored, because later, when she rebuilds, she will need to know exactly where the structure failed. The phone was first. Derek brought me a new one in a white box, the kind of box designed to make you feel you are receiving a gift. Your number was compromised, he said. Scam calls. Megan handled it. He said this while looking at a spot above my left shoulder, which is where Derek has looked when he is lying since he was 11 years old and broke the vase in the shop and told me the wind did it. I took the phone. I thanked him. The new number meant Grace could not reach me. I tested this. I asked Derek one evening when Megan was on a work call, "How is Eunji? Has she started high school?" He smiled the way people smile when they have rehearsed the smile. "She's great, Mum. Really busy with school. She'll visit when things settle down." Things did not settle down. Things narrowed. The church shuttle was next. Every Sunday for 19 years, the Korean Presbyterian shuttle had come at 8:15. Mr. B.A. honked twice, once for hello, once for hurry. When I asked Megan about it, she did not look up from her laptop. They discontinued the route, Halmoni. Budget cuts. I could have called the church, but the phone they gave me did not have Father Park's number, and when I asked Derek for the church directory, he looked for it the way a person looks for something they have already thrown away, with great effort and no result. November was the thread that told me the whole garment was coming apart. I had banked at Wells Fargo for 26 years. I knew my balance the way I knew my own measurements, without looking, because the number lived in my body. I told Megan I had a doctor's appointment. She dropped me at the medical building on Cedar Hills. I walked 3 blocks to the bank. The teller confirmed what I already knew. My deposits were being redirected to a joint account I had not opened, bearing my name and Derek's. I did not raise my voice. I asked for a printed statement and I put it in my purse, and I walked back to the medical building and sat in the lobby until Megan came. That afternoon I opened a safety deposit box. Box 7741. I paid in cash from the fold of bills I kept sewn into the lining of my apron, because a seamstress always keeps something in her lining, and the people who search your purse do not think to search your clothes. I put the printed bank statement inside. It was the first thing. It would not be the last. I began taking inventory the way I would before closing a shop. What is owed, what is owned, what can be saved. I noted dates, I noted amounts I could find, statements left on the printer, numbers Megan read aloud to Derek when she thought I was napping. I was not napping, I was listening. Listening is a kind of sewing. You pull one thread and the whole shape reveals itself. I was not angry. Anger is a garment that does not fit me well. It pulls at the shoulders, it restricts the arms. What I felt was something colder and more useful. The particular clarity that comes when you finally see the pattern you have been standing too close to read. My son had taken my money. My daughter-in-law had built the system to do it. And the world, the pandemic, the isolation, the distance from everyone who knew my name, had given them the fabric to work with. I have been a seamstress for 35 years. I know how to take something apart so it can be put back together. I know how to hide a seam so no one sees where the fabric was cut. I started teaching Grace Korean when she was 9. Saturday mornings, kitchen table, flashcards I made by hand from index cards and a fine tip marker. She thought I was preserving culture. She thought it was about heritage. It was, but not only. The back room of Eunji's alterations was never meant to be a kitchen. I made it one the way I made most things, by deciding it would be, and then sewing the gap between what existed and what was needed. A hot plate on the cutting counter, a rice cooker next to the bobbin organizer, 2 chairs Junho carried from a yard sale on Hawthorne, one with a leg he shimmed with a folded piece of interfacing that held for 11 years. Grace sat in the shimmed chair. She liked it because it wobbled, and she was the kind of child who preferred things that moved. She would rock while she studied the flashcards, her sneakers barely touching the floor, sounding out the characters I had written in careful block print. Gyo, nen, dig. The consonants first, because structure comes before meaning. I know this from sewing. I know this from everything. She called me Halmoni. She had started at 3, standing in the shop doorway with her hand in Junho's, and the word came out of her like it had always been there, not learned but remembered. Halmoni, grandmother. Junho looked at me over her head, and his eyes were full, and I pretended to adjust a seam because we did not cry in front of each other. We cried in the back room, separately, about beautiful things. Junho was alive then. He opened the shop in the mornings while I set up the Korean lessons. He would ring the bell on the door, the brass one he installed himself, the one that never hung straight, to let me know the first customer had come. The bell had a particular sound, slightly flat, like a note sung by someone who doesn't care about pitch but cares very much about being heard. It rang 60, 70 times a day. When he died in 2015, the bell stayed, the sound changed. Everything that remains after someone leaves changes, not in substance but in what it means. 형태가 바뀔 뿐이에요. The form changes, that is all. Grace learned fast. By 10, she could read children's books. By 12, she was writing short letters, clumsy grammar, beautiful effort. I kept every one in a box under the cutting table. By 13, she was conversational, reading slowly but accurately. She translated menus at Korean restaurants with the seriousness of a scholar presenting a thesis. She was proud of it. I was proud of something else entirely. I was making a key. I was making it years before I knew I'd need it. I did not know, in 2016, that Derek's business would fail. I did not know that Megan would build a system to erase me. I did not know I would need to write a letter that only one person in my family could read. I knew only what every seamstress knows, that you measure twice, you cut once, and you always, always leave enough seam allowance for the day you need to let something out. Saturday mornings, the hot plate hissing, Grace rocking in the shimmed chair, Junho's bell, index cards spread across the table like a pattern waiting to be assembled. I taught her the word for coat, kot, and the word for lining, angam, and the word for letter, Eunji. She did not know she was learning the vocabulary of her own inheritance. The letter I would write 12 years later was in Korean. No one else in my family can read Korean, only Grace, only Inhe. I had 1 hour. Derek sat on the couch with his arms crossed. Megan was in the kitchen, and I could hear her making something. The sound of cabinet doors too controlled, the way people perform normalcy when they are nervous. Grace came through the front door at noon. She was 15 and wearing a jacket too thin for December, and when she saw me she said Halmoni before she even took off her shoes. She crossed the room in 3 steps and pressed her face into my shoulder, and I let myself hold her. Briefly, the way you hold something you're about to hand over. "Merry Christmas, in here," I said. I smoothed her hair back. She had Junho's forehead. I had never told her that. There were many things I had never told her, and this afternoon I would begin to fix that, slowly, in the only way I knew how. The coat was in a garment bag on the guest room bed, fabric I had sewn from old shop remnants, so it looked like something I'd made casually, the way I used to make things. Derek wouldn't question it. He had never understood what my sewing was worth. That was the hinge everything turned on. I brought it out and laid it across Grace's lap. Navy wool, knee-length, double-breasted. I had spent 14 months on the lining alone, but from the outside it looked like any winter coat a mother might make for a daughter who ran cold. "For the cold," I said. Grace unfolded it. She held it up by the shoulders the way I had taught her to hold fabric, arms wide, chin up, letting it tell you its shape. "It's beautiful, Halmoni." She rubbed the sleeve between her fingers. She knew good wool. I had taught her that too. "It's heavy, though." "Wool," I said. She accepted this. 15-year-olds accept what their grandmothers tell them about fabric. She did not know that inside the lining, between layers of pojagi I had stitched from her first school dress and Junho's sage shirt and scraps from 30 years of other people's hems, there was a letter in Korean and a key on a yellow cord and a USB drive with her name written on it in my handwriting. She did not know that the letter contained 3 pages, one of numbers, one of facts, and one I could barely finish writing. She did not know that the key opened a box at Wells Fargo on Hawthorne where I had placed everything I could not say aloud in this living room with my son pretending not to watch. She knew the coat was heavy. That was enough for now. "I made your brother one too," I said, quietly, so Derek might not hear it over whatever Megan was doing in the kitchen with those cabinets. "I want you to know that." Grace nodded. She did not ask why I said it that way, as if it mattered, as if I were placing something on a scale. "Halmoni, there's a piece of paper in the pocket," she said. She had already put her hands in. "That is my phone number," I said. "A new one. If you need me, if anything happens, you call that number." The number went to a prepaid phone I had bought at the grocery store with cash, the same trip I bought the navy wool. By the time Grace would try calling it, the phone would be disconnected, but she would have the number. And the number was written on a card I had tucked inside the right pocket, and the card also said, in small letters at the bottom, asterisk, "The house on Division Street is in my name. It has always been in my name. The deed is in the safety deposit box." I did not explain this. She read it and looked at me, and I saw a question begin to form, and I touched her hand. "Keep the coat," I said. "It is yours." She put it on. It swamped her. The sleeves past her wrists, the hem below her knees. She was 15, and the coat was built for an older woman, for the woman she would become in 3 years when the lining would matter. She looked at herself and laughed. "I look like I'm playing dress-up." Derek shifted on the couch. He was watching now. I could feel his attention the way you feel a draft from a window that doesn't seal properly. "It's warm," Grace said. She pulled the collar up. She tucked her chin into the navy wool, and for a moment she looked so much like Junho that I had to press my thumbnail into my palm to keep my face still. I let myself look at her. One moment, the coat hanging open, the lining hidden, my granddaughter inside something I had spent 2 years building in the dark. I memorized the way the fabric fell across her shoulders. I memorized the laugh. Then I said, "It will fit you later." She smiled. She thought I meant the sleeves.
She died in March, 3 years ago today. I found out from Derek's text. 4 words. Mom passed this morning. Thuriod into Miss Athbafane. I was in my bedroom at Derek's house, the room I used on weekends when he remembered to pick me up. I read the text twice. I put the phone face down on the desk. I did not cry for 3 hours, and then I cried in the shower where the sound of the water covered it because I did not know how to grieve in someone else's house. The estate, Derek's word, not mine, came to $200, and the coat, $200 from a woman who had run her own shop for 27 years, who had sewn sewn wedding dresses and prom gowns and winter coats for half of Southeast Portland, $200, and a navy wool coat that weighed more than anything I owned. Derek kept the rest. I didn't know then what the rest meant. I wouldn't know for 3 years. I wore the coat to the funeral, march in Portland, cold enough to justify it, wet enough that the wool darkened at the shoulders. The coat smelled like sesame oil and lavender hand cream and something underneath both of those. Something that was just asterisk her asterisk, fabric sizing, the chemical ghost of a shop that had closed 2 years earlier. April 2023. I moved in with a roommate from school. The coat went into the closet. I hung it on the thickest hanger I could find because it bent the wire once. September 2023. Portland State. Freshman year. I declared econ because I wanted to understand numbers, how money moved, where it went, who decided. I did not yet know this was Halmoni's question 2. February 2024. First winter at PSU, I pulled the coat out of the closet and wore it across campus in the rain. It was too heavy for Portland. People stared. I didn't care. The weight felt like something, like a hand on my shoulder, like someone walking beside me who wasn't there anymore. The sesame oil had faded. The lavender held. June 2024. Soul Bakery on 82nd Ave. I needed a job. They needed someone who could pronounce the menu correctly. Halmoni's Saturday morning Korean lessons. Flashcards at the kitchen table. 9 years old. The alphabet first. Got me hired in 12 minutes. January 2025. David, he was also a barista. He was in line on his day off, ordering a papang, and he pronounced it so badly that I corrected him before I could stop myself. He laughed. He came back the next day. He came back every day for 2 weeks before he asked for my number. He was steady in a way I hadn't known I needed. Not dramatic, not trying to fix anything. He just stayed. February 2025. Second winter in the coat. David asked why I wore it every day for a month. It was my grandmother's, I said, which was only half true. She had made it for me. He didn't push. He zipped his own jacket and walked beside me and did not say that the coat was too heavy for the weather. That was when I decided to keep him. February 2026. Third winter. The coat was part of me now. The way a scar is part of you, the way an accent is. I wore it without thinking. I stopped noticing the weight. I stopped smelling the sesame oil. I almost stopped remembering why I carried it. Almost. March 4th, 2026. I was running late for econ. The coffee was too hot. My elbow caught the door. Mr. Kim called me at the bakery. I almost didn't pick up. I thought it was a robocall. I was mid-pour on someone's drip coffee when the phone buzzed. Unknown number, 503 area code. I let it ring. It rang again. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered with my shoulder against my ear, still holding the kettle. Miss Park? The voice was careful, each word placed like a brick, deliberate, weighted, chosen from limited supply. This is Sang-ho Kim, Kim's Cleaners. You brought a coat yesterday. Right, I said. The navy one. Is there a problem? A pause. Not the kind where someone is thinking, the kind where someone is deciding how much to say. Miss Park, please come back. I set down the kettle. Something in Mr. Kim's voice, not urgency, not alarm, something underneath both. Like a man who has found something he wasn't supposed to find and doesn't know whose secret it is. I can come after my shift, I said. Today, he said, please, today. I asked my manager for an early out. Told her it was a family thing. She let me go at 5. Kim's Cleaners is 3 blocks from Seoul Bakery. I'd passed it 100 times, the Korean lettering on the window, the plastic wrap shirts hanging behind the counter, the bell that rings when you push the door. The bell rang. The shop smelled like solvent and steam and something underneath, the ghost of fabric sizing, that chemical warmth that clings to clothes after they've been handled by someone who knows what they're touching. Korean radio played from a small speaker behind the register. Mr. Kim was standing at his workbench in the back. The coat was laid out flat under the overhead lamp, open like a patient on a table. He had his reading glasses on. His hands were at his sides. Come, he said. I walked behind the counter. He pointed to the coat's interior, the lining I had never looked at closely, not once in 3 years. I'd felt it against my arms, against my back on February mornings. I'd never turned the coat inside out. The lining was not a lining. It was patchwork. Small squares of fabric, indigo, sage, pale gold, ivory, stitched together in a pattern so precise it looked printed until you got close. Then you could see the stitches, tiny even, the spacing of someone who had been doing this for decades. Mr. Kim touched the edge of one square with his fingertip. His hand was steady. This is pojagi, he said. Korean, traditional wrapping cloth. He spoke slowly, not because he didn't know the words, but because each one mattered. My mother made these in Busan before I came to America. He looked at me. This is not just a coat lining. Somebody put something here on purpose. He paused. Your mother? I looked at the patchwork. The indigo square had a weave I recognized, a school dress I wore in second grade. The sage was cotton, soft, the kind of shirt my grandfather wore in every photograph I'd ever seen of him. My mother had built a room inside my coat, and I had walked around in it for 3 years without opening the door. He had a seam ripper on the bench when I got there. He hadn't touched anything. He was waiting for me. The next afternoon, he'd asked me to come back after the shop closed. He'd locked the front door. The clothes sign was up. The overhead lamp on the workbench was the only light in the back of the shop. The coat was in the same position, the pojagi lining exposed. Mr. Kim had a seam ripper and a magnifying lamp and a clean white towel laid out beside the coat. A jeweler's setup. An archaeologist's dig site. Here, he said, pointing to the lower panel. Feel. I pressed my fingers where he indicated. Under the pojagi, something rigid, not fabric, a shape, rectangular, thin, and beside it something smaller, harder, and beside that something else. There is weight here that should not be here, Mr. Kim said. I felt it yesterday during pressing. He picked up the seam ripper and held it out to me. Do you want to open it or should I? I took it. My hands were shaking. His weren't. The seam ripper went through Halmoni's stitching, and I felt it in my teeth. Each tiny stitch, perfect, even, 35 years of practice, let go with a whisper. I cut 12 inches along the bottom panel. Mr. Kim held the magnifying lamp steady. Neither of us spoke. The pojagi opened like a mouth. Inside, a folded document. 3 pages, creased once, written in Korean, Halmoni's handwriting, the careful block characters she used for important things. Beside it, a small key on a yellow cord. The cord knotted twice. And beside that, a USB drive. Black plastic. On its face, in silver marker, in handwriting I would know across any distance. Eunji. My name in Halmoni's hand. I photographed everything with my phone before I touched anything. Some instinct, or maybe some lesson she'd planted so deep I didn't remember learning it. I picked up the document, unfolded it at the workbench under the fluorescent light. I could read Korean, she'd made sure of that. Saturday mornings, kitchen table, flashcards from index cards. I read slowly. Some characters I had to squint at, and I opened my phone's translation app for the harder compounds. But I could read it. Page 1 was a numbered list, account numbers, a box number, 7,741, instructions, specific and ordered. I understood what the key was for. I understood where to go. I didn't speak for a long time. Mr. Kim didn't ask me what it said. He walked to the back where he kept a small electric kettle and made tea. I heard the water boil. I heard him set a cup beside me. I didn't look up. When I finally raised my head, the tea was lukewarm and Mr. Kim was sitting on a stool 3 feet away, his hands folded, looking at the wall. His eyes were wet. After everything she did for them, his voice was quiet, controlled. But the control cost him. I could hear the seams straining. 30 years she built something, and He stopped. He pressed his lips together. I am sorry, he said. I am sorry, Miss Park. I looked at the document in my hands, the key on the yellow cord, the USB with my Korean name in silver marker, written by a woman who had died 3 years ago in a guest room with no lock on the door. Don't apologize, I said. She planned this. I held the USB up to the fluorescent light. Inhe, Grace. That's the most her thing I've ever heard. Mr. Kim looked at me. He didn't smile, but something in his face settled, like a man watching someone lift a weight he'd been afraid was too heavy. He put the coat in a garment bag he didn't charge for. I carried it against my chest. The key and the USB went in my jacket pocket, against my ribs. The document I held in my hand folded once, the way she'd folded it. I walked home in the dark. 3 blocks felt like crossing an ocean into a country I didn't know yet, but was apparently already a citizen of. I read the document 3 times, page 1 twice, the numbers, the account, the box number, the instructions, page 2 once. I could only read it once. The kitchen table, 9 at night, my phone open to the translation app, a cup of tea beside my elbow, going cold in slow degrees. Page 1, Halmoni's handwriting, the formal characters, each one built knowing someone else would read it under circumstances she could not control. Account number, a savings account in her name only, open 2019. Safety deposit box 7,741, Wells Fargo on Hawthorne. Instructions, go to the box first, open it alone, listen to everything before you act. The key is on the yellow cord. I read page 1 twice, wrote the numbers on a Post-it, and stuck it to the wall. Then I turned the page. Page 2. Dates, amounts, actions. September 2020, phone number changed, new number registered to Derek Park. October 2020, church shuttle contact informed Eunji Park no longer attends. November 2020, Social Security redirected to joint account signatories Derek and Megan Park. January 2021, savings withdrawal of $83,000 authorized under financial power of attorney. March 2021, second withdrawal $54,000, purpose listed as home improvement. No improvements made to the guest room. June 2022, manipulated will signed, Eunji not present, signature does not match her hand. She had written all of this in the same even characters, no exclamation marks, no underlines. She stated each fact the way a seamstress would note a measurement. This seam is 12 inches. This dart is 3/4. The fabric was cut here. This is what happened. I read it like reading about a stranger. The nothing I felt was so complete, it had a texture, like holding ice so cold it doesn't register as cold anymore, just pressure where sensation should be. Then I turned to page 3. 4 sentences, that was all. The rest of the page was empty, white space that felt deliberate, the way Halmoni left margins in her sewing for the fabric to breathe. The first sentence, 인해야, 내가 너를 위해 남긴 것들은 사랑이 아니라 증거야. 하지만 증거도 사랑으로 만들 수 있어. 9, Grace, what I have left you is not love, it is evidence, but evidence can be made with love. The second, 열쇠는 문을 열지만 네가 어떤 문을 열지는 네가 결정해. The key opens the door, but which door you open, that is yours to decide. 열쇠야. I'm not ready to tell you the other two. The third sentence is the one that broke me, and the fourth is the one I carry. I will tell you both when the time is right. Halmoni would understand. She taught me that some things earn their moment. I cried, not at page 1 with its clinical inventory, not at page 2 with its catalog of theft, but page 3, 4 sentences in her steady handwriting, not a single tremor in the ink. Page 3 undid me, because the rest of the document was a seamstress closing her shop. Page 3 was a mother saying goodbye. I sat at the kitchen table and cried with my phone still open to the translation app and the tea gone cold and the light too bright for any of it. Then I called David. He answered on the second ring, almost 10 at night. Mijn nieuwsleef, iets samen het parnijns. Then akithaid viken stam en de call David relayed af steen kurtings. Seen pages deal shest at sitserns. Almost 10 at night. Mijn nieuwsleef kunstam en nieuwsleef kur mijn nieuwsleef in kurstav. Hey, he said, you okay? I need you to come over. A long pause, not the kind where someone is deciding, the kind where someone is already putting on shoes. She left me everything, David. My voice cracked on the word asterisk, everything asterisk. She hid it in my coat.
I found out later what happened at the Goodwill on Powell. Not from Derek, never from Derek. From Tomas Reyes, the intake coordinator, who kept a record because something about the coat bothered him and he couldn't stop thinking about it. He told me the whole thing in the parking lot of the cultural centre, standing next to a shopping cart corral, apologising for details he thought I didn't want. I wanted all of them. This is what happened. On February 12th, 2026, 3 weeks before I spilled coffee on my coat, and 23 days before Thomas would call Mrs. Yoon, Derek cleaned out the guest room, the room where Halmoni died. He had not entered it in nearly 3 years except to retrieve a box of Christmas decorations in December 2024, and even then he'd moved fast and left the door open behind him so the hallway light could do the work and he wouldn't have to turn on the overhead. He had run out of places to put things that used to be hers. That was how Thomas described it. Not in those words. Thomas said asterisks. The guy seemed like he was just clearing space, you know. But I know my brother. I know the math of avoidance. 3 years of not entering a room is not grief. It is a man who cannot look at what he chose. Derek put the coat in a black garbage bag. Not a garment bag, not a box. A 50-gallon hefty bag. The kind you use for yard waste. He put a yellow sticky note on the outside with his name and the Beaverton address for the tax receipt. He loaded the bag into the back of his truck, along with 3 other bags, Halmoni's house slippers, 2 blankets, a set of towels she had hemmed herself. He drove to the Goodwill on Powell Boulevard and pulled into the donation lane at 10:15 in the morning. Thomas was working intake. He said Derek carried the bags one at a time, stacked them on the folding table, and signed the donation slip without reading it. He didn't open any of the bags. He didn't describe what was inside. He checked the box that said asterisk household goods asterisk and left the line for itemization blank. He did not look back. Tomas said he watched Derek's truck pull out and merge onto Powell, heading west, toward Beaverton, toward the house with the guest room that now had 4 fewer bags in it. He said it took about 90 seconds. He said Derek's face was the face of a man finishing an errand, not a man giving away his dead mother's things. The coat sat in the donation pile for 6 hours. Tomas processed it at 4 p.m. during his second sort of the day. He pulled it out of the hefty bag and held it up and said, asterisk, huh? Asterisk. Just that, just the sound of a man whose grandmother quilted, recognizing the weight of handmade labor. The lining caught the overhead fluorescent, and something about the patchwork inside made him turn the coat slowly, the way you turn a page you weren't expecting to find. He set it aside. He didn't know why yet, he just knew. Around the coat, in the donation bins, were the things people discard in February. Puffy North Face jackets with broken zippers, fleece pullovers matted from too many washes, ski parkas from seasons no one remembered. The navy wool sat among them like a word in the wrong language. It did not belong there. It did not know that yet. Neither did I. Fall 2020. 3 months since they moved me to Beaverton. Derek drove me to Fredmeyer on Tualatin Valley Highway because I asked for groceries, and because saying no to groceries would have made the shape of things visible, and Derek was not ready for the shape of things to be visible. He was 29 years old, and he was taking his mother to the grocery store, and he could not stop talking. He talked about the weather, he talked about a job he was bidding on, a rewire for a dental office in Tigard, good money if he got it. He talked about Megan's sister's baby and how the baby had started crawling and kept pulling books off the bottom shelf. He talked the way a man talks when silence would require him to hear what is sitting in it. I did not speak. I watched the windshield wipers. Beaverton rain is the same as Portland rain. Thin, steady, the kind that doesn't demand an umbrella but soaks through everything anyway. I counted the wipers. 11 sweeps from the house to the parking lot. I counted because I had been counting things since September. Days since my phone number changed, 43. Days since I last spoke to Grace, $61. Redirected from my social security to the account I did not open. 4 months of deposits. I was a seamstress. I was taking inventory. Inside Fred Meyer, I went to the fabric section. I had not told Derek I wanted fabric. He followed me there the way you follow someone into a room you didn't intend to enter. Half a step behind, hands in his jacket pockets, his eyes moving across the bolts the way they moved across everything now, quickly, without settling. The navy wool was on the second shelf from the bottom. 80% wool, 20% cashmere, heavy, the right weight for a winter coat, the right weight for something meant to be worn for years, the right weight for something meant to carry what I was going to put inside it. I knew the moment I touched it. My hands have known fabric for 35 years. This was the one. I pulled the bolt from the shelf and held it against my forearm. The color was deep, not black navy, not bright navy, the navy of ink on good paper. The navy of the sea at dusk in Busan, which I saw once in 1983 and have never forgotten. Derek stepped forward. "Let me carry that, Mum." I said no. He watched me carry it to the cutting counter. He watched the clerk measure 4.5 yards, enough for 2 coats, though no one asked me why I needed that much, and I did not offer. He watched me take the folded fabric to the register. I paid in cash, bills I had saved from the grocery money they gave me each week. $20 here, 15 there, folded into the lining of my suitcase where Megan would not think to look because Megan thought in credit cards and direct deposits, not in cash pressed flat beneath a zipper. I watched him watch me. I saw the exact moment. He was holding a bag of rice in one hand and his car keys in the other, and his face did something, not a flinch, more like a sentence forming behind his eyes that his mouth refused to say. He knew. In that moment, standing in the checkout lane at Fred Meyer with the fluorescent lights humming overhead and someone's child crying 2 aisles over, my son knew that I knew what he had done, what they were doing, what was being taken. He almost said something. I saw him decide not to. He set the rice on the conveyor belt. He paid for the groceries with his card. He carried the bags to the car. He did not ask what the fabric was for. In the car, I sat in the back with the wool in my lap. The bolt was heavy across my thighs. Outside, the rain had stopped. Derek adjusted the mirror. He turned on the radio, a station Megan liked. Something with guitars and a woman singing about a highway. He drove. The wool was navy, heavy, the right weight for something meant to last. He did not ask.
3 weeks before I spilled coffee on my coat, a man named Tomas Reyes lifted Derek's coat out of a black garbage bag and said, "Huh." I didn't know Tomas then. I didn't know about the garbage bag, or that Derek's name was on a sticky note pressed to the plastic, or that on February 12th, 2026, my brother had thrown away the last thing our mother ever made him. I learned all of this later, from Mrs. Yoon, from Tomas himself. Tomas was an intake coordinator at the Goodwill on Powell Boulevard. He processed donations methodically, with an eye for what doesn't belong. When he held Derek's coat up by the shoulders, the weight shifted, distributed, deliberate. The wool was good. The construction was careful. He turned the coat inside out. The Pojagi stopped him. He didn't know the word yet. He would learn it in 20 minutes, but he knew what he was looking at. His grandmother in Oaxaca had quilted not Korean patchwork, but scraps saved from old dresses and children's clothes, stitched together by women who understood that nothing usable should be wasted. Tomas had grown up watching those hands. He knew the difference between a machine and a person. This lining was a person. He Googled Korean patchwork coat lining. The results gave him Pojagi *. He scrolled through images. The coat's lining matched. Indigo, sage, pale gold, ivory. The stitching was too fine, too even, too intentional asterisk to be decorative hobby work. He searched Korean Cultural Center Portland and found the Portland Korean Cultural Center on Alberta Street. He called. A woman named Mrs. Yoon answered. "I have a coat," Tomas said. "Someone donated it. The lining is, I think it's Pojagi, but somebody made this. It's not something you see." Mrs. Yoon asked him to bring it in. He took a photo of the lining with his phone, the Pojagi spread flat under the break room light, indigo and sage and pale gold, and sent it to Mrs. Yoon. Then he went back to processing donations. But he kept thinking about the weight of the coat, and the hands that had made it, and the person who had put it in a garbage bag.
I began in November. The guest room had no lock, so I worked between midnight and 4 in the morning, when the house settled into the kind of silence that holds still for you if you are careful with it. The sewing machine, my singer, the one Junho bought me in 1998 when the shop was making enough, sat on the maple table by the east window. They had brought it from Division Street when they moved me. They did not know they had brought me everything I needed. The wool was under the bed. 4.5 yards, still folded from the cutting counter at Fred Meyer, smelling faintly of the plastic bag and beneath that of nothing. New fabric has no memory. That is the point. You give it memory by what you make. I cut both coats from the same bolt. I laid the patterns on the guest room floor at 1 a.m., pins in my mouth, the overhead light too dim, so I used a booklight clipped to the collar of my nightgown. 2 coats, identical exteriors. Navy wool, knee-length, double-breasted. The same seam allowances, the same button spacing, the same hem. If you held them side by side, you would not know which was which until you turned them inside out. The Pojagi was where they would differ. Pojagi, the wrapping cloth, the patchwork technique my mother-in-law taught me in Seoul before we left, before Portland, before any of this. You take fabric pieces that are too small to be anything alone and you stitch them into something that holds. It is not quilting. Quilting is layers. Pojagi is light. One layer, translucent if the fabric allows, every seam visible, every join deliberate. You cannot hide bad work in Pojagi. The thread shows. For Grace's coat, I chose carefully. I had been saving scraps for years, not hoarding, just keeping. A seamstress keeps fabric the way other people keep photographs. Grace's first school dress. She wore it in September 2012. Indigo cotton with white stitching at the collar that I did myself because the factory seam was crooked and I could not send her to school with a crooked seam. The dress lasted 2 years. When she outgrew it, I cut the bodice into squares and put them in a box in the shop. Shunho's shirt. The sage green one he wore to our anniversary dinner in 2010, 5 years before he died. He spilled soy sauce on the cuff and I told him I would fix it, and then I never did because I liked the stain. It smelled like him. After he died, I cut the shirt into strips and kept them in the same box. Scraps from the shop, pale gold silk from a wedding alteration in 2008, ivory linen from a curtain job that paid for Grace's birthday present. Each piece had a date in my head, each piece had a name. I stitched them into the lining of Grace's coat over 4 months. Every night, midnight to 4, the pogagi grew slowly, indigo, sage, pale gold, ivory, and it was beautiful in the way that pogagi is beautiful, not decorative but true. Every seam was visible, every join was a choice I made about what to put next to what. Grace's dress beside Junho's shirt, the wedding silk beside the birthday linen. A conversation in fabric. Into the lining I sewed the letter, 3 pages, folded tight, sealed in a plastic sleeve I cut from a document protector. The key on its yellow cord. The USB drive in a small pocket I constructed at the hip seam, reinforced with interfacing so it would not shift. The USB I recorded here, at the machine. I set my phone on the table with the voice recorder running and I did not think about it. I was not making a message. I was working and I was talking to myself the way I always talk when I sew, describing what my hands are doing because it keeps the rhythm steady. 은혜야의 첫 교복 원단이네. 이 인디고 색이 아직도 이렇게 진해. Grace's first school dress fabric. This indigo is still so deep. I said it to the room. I said it to the machine. I said Unhea, asterisk, Grace, asterisk, because I was sewing her coat and her name was in my hands. I was not recording a message for my granddaughter. I was documenting the work the way a craftsperson does, speaking the choices aloud so the hands remember, so the rhythm holds, so the silence doesn't settle in the places where Junho used to sit and read while I sewed. 23 minutes in, I stopped the machine. I picked up 2 of Junho's letters from the stack beside the thread box, and I read them aloud, quietly, because reading them kept him in the room with me, and the room was very empty at 2 a.m. His handwriting, his voice through my voice. And then I started the machine again, and I hummed not a full song, just the first verse of the lullaby I sang when Derek was small, before Derek was the person he became, when he was just a boy who helped me hang the shop sign and whose hands were too small for the hammer. The humming trailed off. The machine picked up again. I did not stop the recording. I forgot it was running. That is the truth of it, I forgot. For Derek's coat, I used the same pojagi technique, the same fabric pieces, the same palette, indigo, sage, pale gold, ivory, the same precision, the same stitch length, the same hand. I sewed his lining at the same table, in the same hours, under the same booklight clipped to my nightgown. I put nothing inside. No letter, no key, no USB, no pocket at the hip seam. I constructed the pojagi with the same care, every join deliberate, every seam visible, and I left the lining empty. I need you to understand, the emptiness was not punishment. I thought about this for 3 weeks before I cut his pattern. I stood at the window of the guest room and I looked at the maple in the front yard and I asked myself what kind of mother makes her son an empty coat. The answer came slowly, the way answers come when you are 60 years old and you have been a seamstress long enough to know that some garments are not finished when you hand them over. Some garments are finished by the person who wears them. Derek's coat was a question. What do you have, my son, that did not come from taking? What would you put here if you had to choose? The space was for him. The emptiness was his. I signed it. In the bottom right corner of the lining, a tiny asterisk E asterisk in thread so fine you would need reading glasses to see it. My needle signature, the one I used on every garment that left my shop for 27 years. 1 letter. My initial. My hand. I finished Derek's coat on a Tuesday. I ran my hand across the empty lining for a long time. The pojagi was smooth and cool under my palm. The same fabrics, the same colors, the same hours of work. It felt like asking a question I already knew he wasn't ready to answer. I left the space open. 사랑해, 아들아. I love you, my son. I still do.
David and I went to the bank on a Thursday, March 7th. I wore the coat. I don't know why. It was 53 degrees and raining, the kind of Portland rain that doesn't commit, just hangs in the air like it's waiting for permission. The coat was too heavy for the weather. I wore it anyway. I think I wanted her with me. Wells Fargo on Hawthorne looks like every Wells Fargo. The carpet absorbs sound. The fluorescent light makes everyone look slightly ill. I gave the woman at the desk the key on the yellow cord and my ID and the death certificate I'd kept in a manila folder in my desk drawer for 3 years. She looked at the key, looked at the certificate, looked at me. Box 7741, she said. Follow me. David waited outside the vault room. He squeezed my hand once at the door and then let go, the way you let go of someone stepping onto a plane. The room was small and beige and had one table and one chair, and the kind of silence that exists only in rooms designed to hold important things that people don't visit often enough. The box was the size of a shoebox. I set it on the table, I opened it. The first thing I saw was a bundle of letters tied with yellow thread, not ribbon, thread. Sewing thread, the kind Halmoni used for hems, the kind that's too thin for anything except the hands that know how to use it. 40 letters, maybe more. I didn't count. The paper was thin, some of it browning at the edges, the handwriting on the envelopes careful and slanting, left the way Korean men of a certain generation were taught to write. Jun-ho, my grandfather, 40 years of letters to my grandmother. I untied the thread and read the top one. It was dated April 1986, 2 years after they married, written from a work trip to Busan. He described the hotel room, the noise of the harbor at 5 a.m., the specific way the morning light came through the window. He wrote, 나는 당신의 손이 그리워요. 다른 것도 그립지만 가장 먼저 손이 그립습니다. Asterisk, I miss your hands. I miss other things too, but your hands first. I didn't move for 10 minutes. David told me later it was 10 minutes. It felt like a season. I was holding 40 years of someone loving my mother. Every envelope had been opened. She'd read them all many times and then retied with that same yellow thread. A bundle of evidence that Eunji Park was loved completely, specifically, across 4 decades in an ocean and the silence after someone dies. I set the letters down carefully. Underneath them, a USB drive, black. Small, labeled in Halmoni's handwriting, Inhae, my name, my Korean name. Her handwriting was steady, the characters precise, unhurried, the way she wrote when she was certain. And at the bottom of the box, folded once, a document, the real will, dated 2022. I almost missed it. It lay flat against the metal bottom like an afterthought. As if Eunji had placed the love first and the logistics last, because she knew the order mattered. I stared at the will for a long time. Then I walked out to the lobby and found David sitting in one of those gray chairs they put in banks for people who are waiting for someone else's revelation. There's a will, I said, and a lot of other things. He didn't ask me what. He stood up and put his jacket around my shoulders, over the coat, like a second layer, like the coat was a person and he was being careful of both of us. I walked out of Wells Fargo into the Portland afternoon light. The rain had stopped while I was inside. The sidewalk was wet and the sky had that clean, pale quality it gets after a rain, as if the city had been rinsed. I was holding the bundle of letters to my chest with both arms. The USB and the will were in my backpack. But the letters I carried against me, the way you carry something alive. Dame D.CTA. Take a breath. She's about to hear her dead mother's voice. If this story is reaching you, like and subscribe. David stayed over that night, not because I asked him to, because he sat down on my kitchen floor with his laptop at 9 p.m. and said, I'm just going to look some things up, and never left. He is not pre-law. He is not even pre-anything, really. Undeclared at PSU, considering urban planning, or maybe law, or maybe something else entirely. He makes good pour-overs at the bakery, and he reads everything twice, and he stays when other people would say you should call a lawyer and go home. That night, he read Oregon estate law on his laptop until 2 a.m, sitting on the linoleum with his back against the cabinet under my sink, and he got almost everything wrong before he got something right. He started with ORS 124.110, abuse of a vulnerable person. Wrong statute. It applied to physical abuse and neglect, not financial exploitation. He read it twice, highlighted 3 sections, then read the cross-references and realized it wasn't what we needed. Then he found ORS 163.205, criminal mistreatment. Closer, but the elements didn't match. He texted me a screenshot at 11:42 p.m. with maybe this, and I was already asleep. I'd fallen asleep on the couch with the coat over me like a blanket, the bundle of letters on the coffee table, the USB drive in my closed fist. noticed. He kept reading. At 1:15 a.m., he went down a thread on a legal aid forum that linked to ORS 411.630, financial exploitation in the context of adult protective services. Wrong again, but it led him to the right neighborhood. He followed links like breadcrumbs. He read case summaries written in language no one outside law school should have to parse. He drank 3 cups of the bad instant coffee I keep above the fridge, and at some point he took off his shoes and his socks and sat there in bare feet on my kitchen floor with the laptop screen reflecting in his glasses. At 2 a.m., he found it, ORS 125.400, financial exploitation of a vulnerable person. He read it once. He read it again. He read the definition section and the penalties section and the cross-reference statutes, and then he stood up and walked to the couch and touched my shoulder. Grace! I opened my eyes. The apartment was dark except for his laptop. I found something. I had to read it twice. I think this applies. We sat on the kitchen floor together, his laptop between us, and read ORS 125.400 line by line. Asterisk, financial exploitation, asterisk, meant the wrongful taking of assets of a vulnerable person. Asterisk, vulnerable person, asterisk, meant an elderly person subject to undue influence. The statute described what Derek and Megan had done so precisely that for a moment I thought Halmoni had written it herself. The same clinical voice, the same patient inventory. David closed the laptop at 2:47 a.m. He rubbed his eyes. His hair was sticking up on one side where he'd been leaning against the cabinet. I'm not a lawyer, Grace, but I found a legal aid clinic, that is. Want me to call them in the morning? Yes. He set his phone alarm for 8 a.m. He fell asleep on the kitchen floor. I put the coat over him, the way you cover someone who stayed up all night reading for you, because that is what love looks like when it is not trying to look like anything. On March 10th, Derek received a certified letter from the legal aid attorney. I know this because the attorney told me, proof of service, a procedural phrase I'd learned that week the way you learn phrases in a country you never planned to visit. I wasn't there. I don't know what Derek's face looked like when he opened the envelope. I don't know if he was in the kitchen or the living room or the guest room where our mother died. I imagine the kitchen. I imagine the envelope on the table. That specific white of legal correspondence, the certified mail sticker, the return address of a downtown Portland law firm he'd never heard of. I imagine him reading the words asterisk, financial exploitation of a vulnerable person, asterisk, and understanding each word individually and then understanding them together and the difference between those two moments. Well, 2 moments. The letter outlined what we knew. The safety deposit box, the real will, the documentation Halmoni had left, dates, amounts, the social security redirect, the changed phone number, every thread she had noted, every cut she had cataloged, now typed in legal language on firm letterhead with a case number and a response deadline. He had known for 3 years that this was possible. He had told himself it wasn't. I don't know how long he sat with the letter. I don't know if Megan was home or if he was alone. I know he didn't call me. He didn't call David. He didn't call the legal aid clinic to negotiate. He put the letter face down on the kitchen table. I imagine this too, the gesture of turning something over so you don't have to see it, as if the words could seep through the paper and stain the wood. And he called his own attorney. That is Derek's response to most things. Not the first honest action, but the first protective one. On March 8th, the same day David fell asleep on my kitchen floor, the same morning I woke up with ORS 125.400 in my head like a song I couldn't stop humming, my phone rang. The number was local. I almost didn't answer. I was standing in my kitchen making coffee, the coat draped over the back of the chair where I'd left it the night before, the letters on the counter, the USB drive next to my laptop like a small black stone. Miss Park, this is Mrs. Yoon from the Portland Korean Cultural Center on Alberta Street. I'm sorry to call so early. That's okay. How can I help you? Miss Park, we found a coat that may have belonged to your mother. My voice went somewhere I couldn't follow. The kitchen was very quiet. The coffee maker clicked off. What kind of coat? Navy wool, double-breasted. It has a pojagi lining, very fine work, artisan level. The stitching has a signature, a tiny letter E in thread. We traced the artisan through local business records. The name listed is Eunji Park, Division Street. I didn't speak for a long time. Mrs. Yoon waited. She was the kind of person who knew the difference between silence that needs filling and silence that needs holding. Miss Park, I'll come today, I said. I'll come today. I hung up. I stood in the kitchen with the phone against my chest the day before I'd held the bundle of letters against my chest, the same gesture, the same pressure, as if I could absorb information through my ribs. I looked at my coat, still on the chair. Navy wool, double-breasted, pojagi, lining full of everything my mother needed me to find. She made him one too. She made him one too. Mrs. Yoon met me at the door of the cultural center with both hands out, the way Korean women greet you when they have already decided you belong to them. She was in her 60s, silver hair cut short, and she wore a hanbok-style apron over a plain sweater. The building on Alberta Street was small, a converted house with community bulletin boards in the hallway and photographs of Korean-American Portland going back to the 1970s, someone's grandmother opening a restaurant on 82nd, a church potluck, a protest sign in Hangul that I couldn't fully read. "You are Grace," Mrs. Yoon said. Not a question. "Yes. Come." She led me to a back room with a folding table and fluorescent lights and a coat rack holding one item. The coat, navy wool, knee-length, double-breasted. I stopped walking. It was identical to mine. Not similar, not inspired by. Identical, the same cut, the same weight, the same deep navy that Halmoni always said was the only color that holds warmth, asterisk, and asterisk dignity. I knew the stitching before I touched it. I knew the seam allowance. I knew the way the collar sat, because my coat sat the same way, because the same hands had made them both. Mrs. Yoon stood back while I picked it up. It weighed less than mine. That registered first. Not a thought, just my hands knowing something my brain hadn't caught up to. 3 pounds, maybe? A coat? Just a coat. I turned it inside out. The pojagi was there. Indigo, sage, pale gold, ivory, the same palette, the same careful geometry. Mrs. Yoon made a small sound, a catch in her breath, and I understood that she had seen this before I came, but was seeing it again through my hands. The patchwork was beautiful, my mother's 35 years of precision in every seam. And the lining was empty. I ran my fingers across every panel. I pressed the fabric between my thumbs, feeling for thickness, a letter, a key, anything sewn between layers. Nothing. I turned the coat over and checked the pockets. Empty. I checked the hem, the collar seam, the shoulder lining. I was methodical about it, the way Halmoni had taught me to check fabric for flaws. Every inch, every direction, no assumptions, nothing. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight. I held the coat up to the light and went over it again, panel by panel, corner by corner. And there, in the bottom right corner, so small I would have missed it without the light, was an asterisk, E asterisk. A single letter in thread so fine it was almost invisible. Eunji's needle signature. The mark she put on everything she made, the only thing she'd left in this coat. Orders. I sat down on the floor. I didn't decide to sit. My legs just stopped working, and I was on the floor with the coat in my lap and Mrs. Yoon's shoes in my peripheral vision. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. I could hear traffic on Alberta through the window. I could hear my own breathing. Orders and there a guide 10 minutes. I know because Mrs. Yoon told me later. She said she watched the clock because she didn't know what else to do. She brought me water in a paper cup. She sat on the floor next to me. She did not say anything. She put the water on the floor between us and folded her hands and waited. "She made him one too," I said. My voice sounded wrong. Flat, scraped clean. She made him the same coat. Mrs. Yoon nodded. She understood which him asterisk. She had already done the research. Eunji Park, Division Street, the Sun in Beaverton, the coat donated to Goodwill in a black garbage bag. She understood. The same hands, Mrs. Yoon said quietly. I looked at the tiny E asterisk again. The same thread, the same patience, the same love, but one coat full and one coat empty. Not an accident, not because she ran out of time. My mother, who planned 14 months ahead, who sewed at 2 a.m., who hid a 3-page letter and a key and a USB drive inside my coat with the precision of an engineer, she left this coat empty on purpose. She left it empty the way you leave a question on the table. I got up. Mrs. Yoon helped me fold Derek's coat. She put it in a cloth bag she'd made herself, a pojagi-style wrapping cloth in white cotton. She understood wrapping. She understood what deserved care even when the contents were hollow. I carried both coats to my car, one in each arm. I laid them in the back seat, mine on the left, Derek's on the right. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time before I started the engine. In my rearview mirror, the 2 coats looked like passengers, like 2 people waiting to be taken somewhere. Like the 2 children of a woman who loved them both and trusted only one of them to carry the full weight. The letters were in a bundle tied with yellow thread, the same thread Halmoni used for pojagi borders. I had brought them home from the safety deposit box days earlier, but I'd been circling them the way you circle something you know will change everything once you touch it. I untied the thread at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I didn't drink. There were 43 letters. 43. The earliest was from Seoul, 1984. Junho's handwriting was small and neat and entirely in Korean, the characters precise, the spacing even, the lines running straight without a ruler. He wrote to Eunji 2 weeks after their wedding. 내가 오늘 시장에서 감을 봤는데 당신 생각이 났어요. 당신도 감처럼 박은 단단한데 안은 달아요. I saw persimmons at the market today and thought of you. You are like a persimmon, hard on the outside, sweet inside. He compared his new wife to a fruit. He underlined asterisk sweet asterisk twice. In 1984, Junho Park was 21 years old and absolutely helplessly in love, and he had not yet learned any better way to say it than persimmons. I pressed my thumb against the ink. 42 years old, this letter. The paper was thin as skin. The letters from Portland started in 1993, first year in America, Korean still, but now with English words scattered through like seeds in unfamiliar soil. Asterisk Eunji, today I learned the word mortgage. 영어로 이렇게 말해, we own this now. 우리 것이에요. He was learning English by writing to his wife in both languages at once, switching mid-sentence the way I switched, the way Halmoni switched, the way everyone in our family has always reached for the language that holds more. By 2000, he was writing letters that were half English, half Korean, and entirely specific. He described the weather. He described what Eunji wore. He described the bell on the shop door and how it sounded different in rain. He described 7-year-old Derek helping hang the shop sign. He held the ladder so seriously like a small foreman, and I had to put that letter down and breathe for a minute because the man he described was not the man I knew. The last letter was 2014. A year before he died, his handwriting had changed, larger, less steady, the lines drifting upward on the page, but the words were clear. 오늘 당신이 재봉틀 앞에 앉아있는 걸 봤어. 30년째 같은 자세인데 매번 처음 보는 것처럼 아름다워. 당신 손이 이 세상에서 내가 아는 가장 아름다운 거야. I watched you at the sewing machine today. 30 years and the same posture, and every time I see it, it is beautiful for the first time. Your hands are the most beautiful thing I know. He wrote this knowing he was dying. He didn't say he was dying. He said her hands were beautiful. He said asterisk, every time asterisk. I read all 43 letters in order. It took 2 hours. When I finished, the tea was cold and the kitchen was dark, and I was sitting at the table with 40 years of a man's love spread out in front of me like a map of a country I had never visited. He loved her completely. 40 years, and he loved her the way you love someone you're still surprised you found. Not fading, not routine, surprised. Every letter, surprised. I put the last letter down. I tied the bundle back with the yellow thread. Slowly. The way you handle something that belongs to someone who isn't alive to hold it anymore. Then I picked up the USB drive. The apartment was dark except for the laptop screen. I had turned off every light without deciding to just move through the room, switching things off the way you prepare a space for something that requires silence. It was almost midnight, rain on the windows. The coat hung on the closet door behind me. I plugged in the USB, one file, inhey.werv, 38 minutes. I pressed play. Inhey one machine first. The rhythmic thump click of the pedal, the hum of the motor, the specific sound of thread being pulled through heavy fabric. I knew this sound. I had grown up with this sound. Saturday mornings in the shop, falling asleep in the back room to its rhythm. It was the sound of my mother's hands working. It was the sound of a particular kind of attention that had no name. Then her voice. Korean, low, murmuring, the way she talked when she was alone, not performing, not addressing anyone, just speaking the way people speak to themselves when they think no one is listening, narrating what they're doing, talking to the work. 이건 1999년에 만든 초록 드레스에서 왔어. 최신의 딸이 리드 대학 첫 등교날에 입었지. This is from the green dress I made in 1999. Mrs. Choi's daughter wore it to her first day at Reed. She was describing the fabric, each piece of pojagi, each scrap of someone else's life that she was stitching into the coat's lining. She narrated them the way a curator catalogs a collection, specific, reverent, precise. 이 노란 건 은영 씨 결혼식 드레스에서 가져온 거야. 2003년이었나? 그 사람 남편이 결혼식 내내 울었어. 좋은 사람이었어. The yellow from Mrs. Young's wedding dress, 2003. Her husband cried through the whole ceremony. He was a good man. She was cataloging her life. Every piece of fabric was a person she had touched, a dress she had made, a moment she had witnessed through the labor of her hands. 35 years of sewing, reduced to scraps, stitched into a coat no one had asked her to make. The machine paused. I heard her shift in the chair. 아버지가 이 셔츠를 정말 좋아했어. Your father loved this shirt. She said it simply. The sage fabric, Junho's Sunday shirt. She was holding a piece of her dead husband's clothing and talking to no one about how he loved it. The machine started again. Minutes passed. The recording had no structure, no beginning, middle, end. It was just a woman working and thinking aloud in the order things occurred to her. She hummed fragments. She corrected a stitch with a murmur I couldn't quite catch. She said Unheya once, early, almost absently, not to me, not to a camera, but the way you say someone's name to yourself when you're thinking about them. The way you talk to a coat when you've been sewing it for 14 months and the coat has become the person it's for. 23 minutes in, she stopped the machine. The silence was sudden and physical. The hum cut out and the room on the recording became very quiet and my room became very quiet too. And for a moment we were in the same silence, 3 years and a death apart. She read one of Junho's letters aloud. Her voice was steady and low, the way you read something sacred, not to an audience, but to yourself, to the man who wrote it, to the room that still held his shape. Then a second letter. She read them both in Korean, slowly, giving each word its weight. I could hear the paper in her hands. She put the letters down. The machine did not start again. Not yet. The silence held. 형태가 바뀔 뿐이에요, 은혜야. She said it quietly, to herself, to the coat, to my father, to the room. 사랑은 안 끝나. 형태만 바뀌어. The form only changes, Grace. Love doesn't end. Only the form changes. The machine started again. She sewed for another 12 minutes. She did not speak. The sound of the machine filled the recording, steady, rhythmic, a woman finishing what she had started. The file ended. I sat very still. The laptop screen glowed. The rain continued. The coat hung on the closet door, and I could feel it there the way you feel someone standing behind you. Not a presence exactly, but the absence of absence. I sat at the desk with my hands in my lap, and I did not cry. Not yet. I sat with the silence the way she had sat with her sewing, attending to it, letting it tell me its shape. Then I played the last 30 seconds again, just the machine, still running, mid-stitch, the hum cutting off mid-breath as if someone had simply stopped listening. The rhythm of it, the hum, the pedal, the thread being pulled through fabric by hands I would never hold again. I played it again. I played it a third time. The fourth time, I started crying. Not the way I cried when she died. Not the shower. Not the covered sound. Not the hiding. I cried sitting upright at my desk in the dark with my mother's sewing machine in my ears and my hands flat on the table. I cried and I did not wipe my face because I did not want to move my hands and break the rhythm of listening. She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to herself. She was talking to the coach. She was talking to my father. And I heard every word anyway. That is the whole point. That was always the whole point. I didn't sleep much, an hour, maybe 2, in the desk chair with my cheek against the coat sleeve. I woke at 5:30 with the laptop dead and the apartment gray with early light and my neck stiff and my face tight from the salt of dried tears. I made coffee, not the Americano I ordered at the cart outside Smith Hall, just drip coffee, the cheap Mr. Coffee Maker I'd bought at Goodwill my freshman year, the one that gurgles before it brews. I stood in the kitchen while it percolated and watched the light come in through the window over the sink. Portland and March, wet and gray and still. Both coats were draped over the chair at the kitchen table, mine on the left, Derek's on the right. I had brought them both in from the car the night before and set them there without thinking, the way you set a place for someone at dinner. The navy wool caught the early light, and the poagi linings were visible, one full of story, one empty except for a letter so small you needed a flashlight to see it. I sat down across from them. I heard you, I said. My voice was rough from crying and not sleeping, and the particular kind of silence that fills a room after you've listened to someone who can't hear you listening. I said it to both coats. I said it the way she'd said Unheya on the recording, not to anyone, not to an audience, to the room, to the work. I heard all of it. I drank my coffee. I looked at the coats. I thought about the green dress from 1999 and Mrs. Choi's daughter, and the sage shirt Junho loved, and the yellow from a wedding where the husband cried the whole time. I thought about a woman sitting at a sewing machine at 2 a.m. in a guest room with no lock, talking to fabric because there was no one else to talk to, and recording it because why? Because the work deserved a witness, because the thread deserved a voice, because she was a seamstress, and seamstresses document what they make. I called Mr. Kim at 7:15, too early probably. He picked up on the second ring. Mr. Kim, it's Grace Park. Miss Park, his voice was awake, alert, he'd been up. How are you? It wasn't a question, it was an offering. A place to put something if I needed to. I wanted to say thank you, I said, for finding what you found, for calling me back. Your mother was very deliberate, he said. Yes, I said, she was. A pause. The sound of his shop in the background, the hiss of a press, Korean radio, the particular hum of a dry cleaner's morning, the sounds of someone else's work. You take your time, Miss Park. Whatever comes next, you take your time. I hung up. I washed my coffee cup. I put it upside down on the drying rack and stood there for a moment with my hands on the counter, breathing. Then I put on Halmoni's coat. My coat. I pulled the collar up. It was still too heavy, 4 pounds and 2 ounces of wool and pojy and everything she couldn't say aloud. The sleeves fit me now, 3 years, and they fit me the way she'd planned, the way she'd cut the pattern for a woman I hadn't become yet when she gave it to me. It was 7 a.m., Portland was wet and gray, and I walked anyway. The coat was still too heavy, it fit her now.
I finished the second coat on a Tuesday in January. The light through the guest room window had gone the colour of wet slate, and my eyes were doing that thing again, the blur at the edges, like looking through a window someone breathed on. I blinked it away. I had been blinking it away for weeks. The headaches came most mornings now, a dull pressure behind my left eye that I noted the way I noted rain. It was there, it would pass or it wouldn't. 2 coats, navy wool, both of them. The same fabric from the bolt I'd found at Fred Meyer. 4.5 yards of navy wool, because the hand was right, that particular density that holds a press but forgives a fold. I knew even then that I was buying for 2. Grace's coat I lined with pojagi silk, the pale blue and cream pieces I'd been saving since before Junho died. Into that lining, I stitched pockets where a letter would rest flat against the body, where a key would settle without bulk, where a USB drive would sit like a button beneath fabric. Everything she would need. I sewed it the way I sew everything, so that each seam serves a purpose you might not see until you need it. Derek's coat I lined with pojagi too. The same technique, the same careful joins of colour. But his lining held nothing. I left it empty the way you leave a door unlocked, not because you've forgotten, but because you're waiting to see who walks through. In the corner where the lining meets the facing, I stitched a single letter. A small *E* in thread that matched the silk so closely you'd need light and patience to find it. My initial, my name. The only thing I could leave him that he hadn't already taken. I folded his coat and placed it in the hall closet between his winter jacket and a garment bag he never opened. He wouldn't notice it for months. That was fine. Some things are meant to be found late. The document took longer than the sewing. 3 pages. I wrote it at the sewing table with the machine pushed aside, in Korean first because my hand thinks in Korean, then translated it into English because Grace reads both, but attorneys read one. Instructions on the first page. Evidence on the second, dates, amounts, the account transfers I'd catalogued on my phone before Derek changed the passwords. The third page was 4 sentences long. I will not write them here. Grace will read them when she's ready. I put the document in the safety deposit box at Wells Fargo on Hawthorne, along with the USB and Junho's letters and the will. The key went into Grace's coat, the coat I would give her at Christmas during the visit Derek had agreed to. 1 hour. It would be enough. In March, I found my old phone in the bottom of a sewing basket, the one with the cracked screen that Derek didn't know about. I charged it with a cord from the kitchen drawer. I called Grace on a Sunday morning when Derek and Megan were at brunch. 11 minutes. She told me about her economics class and a boy named David who studied too hard. I told her that her pojagi stitching was getting better, which was a lie. She'd never tried pojagi, but I wanted her to remember the word. She laughed. I held that sound for a long time after I hung up. I planted what I could. The rest is yours. I turned off the sewing machine. The motor wound down with that particular sigh it makes, a sound I have heard 10,000 times and will not hear again. I ran my hand along Derek's empty lining one more time, the silk cool and unburdened under my fingers. 사랑해, 아들아. I left the room.
The legal aid attorney's office smelled like copier toner and instant coffee. Her name was Sandra Reyes, and she had a framed poster of Mount Hood behind her desk that was slightly crooked. I noticed this because I noticed things like that, the way spaces are arranged, what's level, what isn't. Halmoni taught me to see rooms the way she saw fabric. Every line matters, even the ones people think are hidden. Sandra laid out 3 options. She used a yellow legal pad and wrote each one in block letters, which I appreciated. It meant she'd done this before, that she knew people in my position needed to see the words outside their own heads. 1. Criminal referral. ORS 125.400, financial exploitation of a vulnerable person. The statute David had found at 2 in the morning reading legal aid websites with his glasses pushed up on his forehead because his prescription was wrong and he refused to get new ones. Sandra said the county DA would review it. She said it could result in felony charges. She said could twice. 2. Civil suit. Recovery of assets plus damages. Sandra said this was slower. She said the word discovery in a way that made it sound like surgery. 3. Negotiated agreement. Structured repayment, terms set by us. No court unless the terms were broken. Sandra said this one required something the other 2 didn't. She paused. It requires you to sit across from him. I asked what would cost him everything. Sandra looked at me. Option 1. Possibly option 2 combined with 1. A felony conviction would follow him. He'd lose his electrical contractor's license. It would be public record. I asked what would leave a door open. Option 3, but only if you mean it. A door you leave open out of guilt isn't a door, it's a trap for both of you. I went home. David was at the library. The apartment was quiet the way it only gets on Tuesday afternoons when the upstairs neighbor is at work and the street noise thins out enough that you can hear the refrigerator cycling. I sat on the bed with both coats, mine heavy with everything Halmoni had hidden inside it, all of it found now, all of it known, and Derek's, which I'd brought back from the Korean Cultural Center in a paper bag, holding it the whole bus ride like something fragile, though it was just wool and silk and nothing. I played the USB one more time. Not the whole thing, just the part near the end where Halmoni's voice gets quieter and the sewing machine is still running underneath her words. The needle punching through fabric in steady rhythm, her voice in Korean, talking to herself, or to no one, or to whoever might one day press play. 마인의 꽃반에 길을 잃었어. 문을 잠그지 마. 마인의 sta asterisk your brother lost his way. Don't lock the door. I sat with that for a long time. I held Derek's coat in my lap and ran my thumb over the tiny asterisk, E asterisk, in the corner of the lining, that single letter she'd hidden where only someone looking with love or desperation would find it. She had made him a coat, she had lined it with beauty, and she had left it empty, not as punishment, but as a question. Asterisk, what will you put here yourself? I opened my laptop, I typed the email in 4 minutes, I read it once, I didn't revise, I hit send. Asterisk, I want to meet once. Bring Megan. I'll tell you what I have and what I'm offering. One time only. They knocked at 2 o'clock. I know because I'd been watching the time on my phone since 1:30, sitting at the small table I'd cleared of textbooks and floor plan sketches and the coffee mug David had washed before leaving that morning. He'd offered to stay. I told him this was something I needed to do with the specific number of people who were in Halmoni's will, and he understood, because David always understands the things I don't fully say. I opened the door. Derek was wearing a button-down I didn't recognize. Megan stood slightly behind him, holding a pot with both hands. The lid was sealed with a kitchen towel tucked under the rim, and when the air from the hallway hit me, I knew instantly, completely what was inside. Doenjang jjigae, Halmoni's recipe. The proportion of doenjang to anchovy stock that Halmoni never wrote down, but Megan had learned in 2017, standing in Halmoni's kitchen on Sundays, taking notes on her phone while Halmoni measured with her hands. The smell of it kept warm too long in transit, the fermented edge that deepens when the pot sits covered in a car. Thank you, I said. Megan set it on the counter. Nobody said anything else about it. The pot stayed there for the rest of the meeting, lid on, the towel still tucked underneath. I gestured to the chairs. Derek sat. Megan stood behind him for a moment, then pulled over the step stool I used to reach the kitchen cabinets and sat on that. I remained standing. I placed the document on the table first. 3 pages, Korean and English, Halmoni's handwriting on the original, my typed translation beside it. Then the will, then the attorney's summary. Sandra Reyes had prepared a 1-page outline outline of the relevant statutes and the documented withdrawals. $137,000 across 2 accounts, $83,000 in January 2021, $54,000 in March 2021. Derek's name on every authorization. Under Oregon law, I said, this meets the threshold for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I used the word once. I did not use it again. Derek read each page. Megan read over his shoulder. Neither of them spoke. The refrigerator cycled on and off. Outside, someone on the street was calling a dog. I brought out both coats. I laid them on the table side by side. Mine on the left, Derek's on the right. I opened the lining of Derek's coat. The pojagi silk, blue and green and cream, stitched with the same care as mine, the same precision in every join. I unfolded it so the full interior was visible. Then I stepped back. Derek looked at me. I said nothing. He picked up the coat. He turned it inside out slowly, the way you handle something when you already know what you're afraid of finding. He ran his fingers along the seams, all of them, from collar to hem, pressing into each join, searching for the weight of something hidden, a letter, a key, anything. There was nothing. He went through it again, slower this time. His fingers stopped at the corner where the lining met the facing. He leaned closer, pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, held it against the silk. The tiny *E* appeared in the light. Halmoni's initials, stitched in threads so close to the color of the fabric that it was almost invisible. Derek held the coat up to the window. The afternoon light came through the pojagi, turning the silk translucent, and the empty lining glowed, blue and green and cream, beautiful and holding nothing. He sat down. He didn't say a word. I let the silence stay. It was the only apology he could offer that I would believe. Then I placed the USB drive on the table next to his coat. She recorded herself while she was making the coats. She wasn't talking to you. She wasn't talking to me either, but you should hear it. Derek looked at the drive. He didn't pick it up yet. Full repayment, I said. 7 years, structured installments, mandatory family counseling, both of us together with a licensed therapist. If the terms are met, the criminal referral is dropped. I paused. If they're not met, Sandra Reyes files everything she has. You have 72 hours to decide. I walked to the apartment door and opened it. Derek stood. He picked up the USB drive and put it in his shirt pocket. Then he picked up his coat, didn't fold it, didn't look for a bag, just gathered it against his chest with one arm, the lining facing inward, the empty pojagi pressed against his shirt. He walked out without looking back. He didn't put the coat down. I could see him through the hallway window, crossing the parking lot to the car, holding it the whole way. Megan followed. She paused at the door, not long, just a breath, and then she was gone. The Dunyang jjigae stayed on my counter. I closed the door. I locked it. I walked to the middle of the room and sat down on the floor, my back against the side of the bed, next to my own coat. Halmoni's coat, the one that had carried everything, that had started all of this. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to hold it anymore. I just sat there, in the quiet, in the apartment that smelled faintly of fermented soybean paste and wool, which is its own kind of answer. The jjigae was still on the counter. I hadn't touched it. Megan had set the pot down at the meeting. White ceramic, Costco probably, the lid slightly ajar. And when no one ate, when the whole room went silent and the coats were on the table and Derek was holding empty fabric and not speaking, Megan had packed it up without looking at me. She'd put it in a takeout container. She'd handed it to me at the door. She hadn't said anything. I'd taken it the way you take something from someone when you are too exhausted to refuse. Now it sat on my counter in the morning light. The apartment smelled like doonjang and garlic and sesame, the base notes of every pot of jjigae halmoni ever made. I recognized the ratio. Megan had learned it exactly. I took a bowl from the cabinet. I opened the container and spooned jjigae into it and put it in the microwave. Then I stood there. The microwave hummed. The clock on the wall said 7:40. I watched the bowl turn on the glass plate and I thought about Megan in Halmoni's kitchen in 2017 before everything, learning the ratios, how much doonjang, how much gochugaru, the specific moment you add the tofu so it doesn't fall apart. The microwave beeped. I took the bowl out and sat down and ate it cold. Not cold, lukewarm maybe? I hadn't waited long enough. I'd forgotten to wait. The first bite hit me somewhere behind the sternum and I stopped chewing and just held it in my mouth. It tasted like Eunji's kitchen on Division Street. It tasted like Saturday mornings and the sewing machine humming in the other room and the bell on the door when a customer came in. It tasted like before. I cried briefly, not the way I'd cried at the USB, not the full body thing that takes your breath and leaves your face tight with salt, something smaller, something that came up like a hiccup and left just as fast. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and took another bite. Megan had been making this since 2017, 9 years. She had learned Halmoni's recipe and kept making it through the isolation, through the redirected social security and the changed phone number and the canceled church shuttle. She had been cooking Eunji's food while erasing Eunji's life. I didn't understand how those two things lived in the same person. I didn't forgive her for it, but I understood, sitting there with the lukewarm jjigae in my mouth, that she had been trying badly, trying wrong, trying in a way that excused nothing, but trying. Both coats were draped over the kitchen chair, mine and Derek's, full and empty. I looked at them. She made him one too, I said. I know you know. The coats didn't answer. I hadn't expected them to. I called David at 7:50. He picked up on the first ring. He'd been waiting, probably. He was always waiting at the edges, not pushing. He's going to accept, I said. How do you know? Because she planned for that too. David was quiet. The sound of his apartment behind him, coffee machine, morning news, a window he always left cracked, even in March. Okay, he said. I'll be here. I finished the jjigae. I rinsed the bowl and set it upside down on the drying rack the way I always do, the way Halmoni used to. Bowl inverted, lip touching the rack, letting gravity do the work. I put on my coat. Not Derek's, mine. I pulled the collar up and felt the weight settle across my shoulders. 4 pounds and 2 ounces of everything she put there. I went to work. He called at hour 71. I was behind the counter at Soul Bakery, between a cortado and a taro latte, when his name appeared on my phone. The screen glowed against the espresso machine. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked up. Grace, his voice was different, quieter, compressed, the way a voice sounds when someone has been sitting alone in a room for a long time and their throat has forgotten how to project. He sounded like a man who'd been listening to something he couldn't unhear. Derek, a pause. I could hear him breathing. The specific silence of his house, the suburban kind, central heating and double-paned windows and no street noise. The house where Halmoni died in the guest room while he was at work. I listened to it, he said, the recording. I didn't say anything. The espresso machine hissed behind me. A customer browsed the pastry case. Croissants, red bean buns, the sesame cookies we bake fresh at 6 a.m. She was talking to herself, Derek said. Yes. Another pause, longer this time. I heard him swallow. I could see him, not literally, but I could build him in my mind, sitting at the dining table, the empty coat nearby, the laptop closed now, the USB on the table like a small black stone. A man who had just heard his mother's voice for the first time in 3 years, and what she'd been doing was talking to fabric. Not to him. Not an accusation, not a message. Just a woman working alone at 2 a.m. in a guest room with no lock, narrating the pieces of her life to a coat she was building for someone else. I'll sign whatever you need, he said. I'll have the attorney send the agreement. That was it. That could have been it. We could have hung up there, two people who shared a mother and nothing else, sorting the paperwork of her afterlife. But he didn't hang up. The jjigae, he said, Megan made it from Mom's recipe. She's been making it since 2017. I know. Silence, not hostile, not warm, just two people holding the same fact between them and not knowing what to do with it. Megan had learned to cook Eunji's food before she'd learned to take Eunji's life apart. Maybe those two things weren't as far from each other as I wanted them to be. Okay, Derek said. Okay, he hung up or I hung up. I don't remember who ended the call. It was the kind of ending that happens in the middle, where both people stop at the same time because there's nothing left to say and the silence has already said it. I put my phone down. I wiped the counter. The customer at the pastry case chose a red bean bun and a drip coffee. I made the next order, flat white, oat milk, no sugar. My hands were steady on the portafilter. The milk steamed and I poured the foam and I set the cup on the counter and called the name. The bakery smelled like sesame and butter and espresso. The coat hung on the hook by the back door, where I always left it during shifts. From here it looked like any coat, navy wool, heavy, the kind of thing a mother would make for a Portland winter. Nobody walking by would know what was sewn into the lining. Nobody would know what was missing from the other one. I made the next order, and the next. My hands did the work while my mind held the sound of Derek's voice saying asterisk. She was talking to herself asterisk. The first true thing he'd said about Halmoni in 3 years. I walked to Division Street on a Saturday in May. I don't know why it had to be a Saturday. I told myself it was because I had the morning free, but that wasn't it. Saturdays were Korean lesson days. Kitchen table, flashcards, the fine tip marker, Halmoni's hand guiding mine through the strokes. In, hey, ya, Grace, my name in her handwriting. over and over until my hand knew the shapes without looking. The shop was gone. I had known it for years. Eunji's alterations closed in 2020 when Derek moved her to Beaverton. Someone else had the lease now, but knowing and seeing are different things, and standing on the sidewalk where the door used to be was different from both. It was a bubble tea shop. The sign was bright green with a cartoon cat. The awning was new, striped, cheerful, the kind of thing that photographs well for Instagram. The bell on the door was gone. That was the thing that hit me, the bell. Junho had hung it the year they opened, with a hook he'd bent from a coat hanger because the proper hardware was too expensive. Every customer who walked in for 27 years heard that bell. Every bolt of fabric, every hem dress, every winter coat that came in for relining, all announced by a bell made from a coat hanger by a man who could make anything work with whatever he had. Now the door had a hydraulic closer. Silent, efficient, no bell. I stood outside for a while. People walked past. Saturday morning on Division's coffee shops, a bookstore, someone walking a dog that was too large for its leash. I took out my mechanical pencil and my notebook, the one I carry everywhere, the one with 11 floor plans for houses I'll never build. I started drawing the old layout from memory. I'd spent 1,000 Saturdays in that shop, and the floor plan was in my hands, the way the Korean alphabet was in my hands. Practiced until it didn't need thinking. I drew the front counter first, the old register, the receipt spindle, the small bowl of mince Halmoni kept for customers. Then the bolt shelves along the left wall, floor to ceiling, organized by fabric weight, the wool always on the top shelf because Portland is a wool city. The fitting area with the curtain she'd made from leftover dress fabric. 3 different florals stitched together. The narrow hallway to the back, and the back room, the sewing table under the window. Halmoni always sat near the window for the light, the singer that Junho never touched. It was always mine, the pedal worn smooth on the right side where her foot rested. I drew the machine in careful detail, the bobbin housing, the needle plate, the thread guide. I'd sat next to it so many times that my pencil knew its shape. Oh, I drew the kitchen table, the one where we did Korean lessons Saturday mornings. Flashcards spread out, the fine tip marker, 2 cups of barley tea. I drew the chairs, Halmoni's on the left, mine on the right. I labeled it in careful hangul, Inhei Kyusho. Grace's classroom. My pencil stopped. I looked at the drawing, a floor plan of a place that didn't exist anymore, drawn on a sidewalk in front of a bubble tea shop, by a girl with a mechanical pencil behind her ear and a coat that weighed 4 pounds and 2 ounces. Nobody had asked me to do this. Halmoni never knew I drew floor plans. This was mine, not inherited, not planted, not planned 14 months in advance. Just something I did when the world needed measuring and words weren't enough. The door of the bubble tea shop opened. A woman came out holding a taro drink with boba. She saw me standing there with my notebook and paused. "You doing architecture?" I looked up. She was around my age, maybe a year older, sunglasses pushed up into her hair. "Something like that," I said. She nodded and walked on. I capped my pencil and tucked it behind my ear. I closed the notebook and held it against my chest for a moment, the way you hold something that holds something. Then I walked home. The coat was heavy. The morning was cool. Division Street was the same street it had always been, and it was not, and both things were true at the same time, the way Halmoni always said they could be. Derek signed the agreement on a Tuesday. His attorney sent the paperwork to Sandra, and Sandra called me at work, and I said okay and made the next latte and didn't feel anything for about an hour. Then I felt everything. Then it passed. He returned the coat the following week. Not in person, he mailed it. A flat-rate USPS box, the navy wool folded carefully in tissue paper. Someone had folded it with the collar facing up and the buttons aligned the way you fold something when you are trying to say you understand it is not just fabric. That was Megan. A post-it on the tissue paper. Derek's handwriting, cramped, the way handwriting gets when someone has been thinking too hard about what to write. Asterisk, she would have wanted you to have it. I hung it in the closet. The only closet, the narrow rectangle. I moved my rain jacket to the hook on the back of the door, moved the PSU flannel to the shelf above. I made room. Both coats hang there now, side by side, the full one on the left, mine, the pojagi lining restitched by Mr. Kim after the letter and the key and the USB came out. He'd stitched it closed the way Halmoni would have, tight, invisible, respectful. The pockets still smell like sesame oil and lavender, fainter now, but there. The empty one on the right, Derek's identical navy wool, identical cut. Same hands made it, Same late nights at the sewing machine in a guest room with no lock. Same careful selection of pojagi fabric, indigo, sage, pale gold, ivory. The same love. She didn't make one coat out of love and one out of judgment. She made two because she had two of us. I turned the empty lining out last week with a flashlight. The signature, bottom right corner, a tiny asterisk E asterisk in thread so fine it disappears unless you hold the light at exactly the right angle. I traced it with my fingertip, feeling the thread rise barely above the fabric, and I thought, she signed everything she made. That was just who she was, not for an audience, not for proof. The way a baker scores bread, because the work is not complete until your hand says asterisk, I was here. Snake, she made two, both signed. One full, one empty, both acts of love. I stood back and looked at them. The full one hangs slightly heavier. The pojagi lining pulls the left shoulder forward by maybe a centimeter, a lean so subtle you'd never notice unless you'd carried that weight across your own shoulders for 3 years. The empty one hangs straight, perfect, unburdened. If you stayed with me this far, thank you, I mean that. Leave a comment and tell me, what would you have done, forgiven or not? And if someone left you something worth finding, anything at all, a letter, a recipe, a coat that weighed more than it should, I'd like to hear about it. I left the closet door open. I don't know why. I used to close it every night, the door shut, the coats in the dark. Now I leave it open. Both coats visible from the kitchen table, from the desk, from the bed. 2 rectangles of navy wool, one full, one empty, made with the same hands. Closing CTA woven into Grace's narration after she describes both coats. If you stayed with me this far, thank you. Leave a comment and tell me, what would you have done, forgiven or not? And if someone left you something worth finding, anything at all, a letter, a recipe, a coat that weighed more than it should, I'd like to hear about it. I sat at the kitchen table the next morning with my notebook open and my mechanical pencil. The apartment was quiet. Portland gray outside, the kind that isn't rain and isn't sun, just a sky that has decided to wait. I was drawing. Not a house I'd never build. I was drawing my apartment, the 400 square feet I know by heart. Front door, kitchenette along the left wall, desk under the window, bed in the corner, the bathroom where the shower curtain touches both walls. The kitchen table where I was sitting, which was a strange thing to do, drawing the table from the table like a mirror inside a mirror. Then I drew the closet. I drew it carefully. 2 rectangles inside, side by side. The left one shaded darker, heavier. The right one just an outline. I labeled them in my careful architect's print. Grace's coat. Derek's coat. I looked at the labels for a long time. I thought about adding Halmoni's name somewhere, above both maybe, or in the margin, but I didn't. She was already there. She was the hand that made them. You don't label the hand, you label what the hand made. Halmoni made 2. That is the whole sentence. She made 2. I thought about the sewing machine, under the real will, the one she hid in the safety deposit box. The singer comes to me, the one Junho never touched, the one that was always hers. I don't know how to use it. I've watched her 1,000 times. The pedal, the bobbin, the way she guided fabric under the needle, never forcing, just directing. But watching and knowing are different things. I'll learn. 형태가 바뀔 뿐이에요. The form changes, that is all. Halmoni said it on the recording, to herself, not to me. She was sewing and she murmured it the way you murmur something you've known so long it comes out like breathing. She meant the fabric, cutting a dress apart to make a lining. Nothing is lost when it becomes something else. I think she also meant everything else. I think she meant I am not gone. I am the coat. I am the thread. I am the Korean letters you can read because I sat with you every Saturday for 6 years with flashcards and a fine tip marker. I closed my notebook. The mechanical pencil went behind my ear. 12 notebooks of floor plans. This was the first where I drew a room that already had everything in it. I made coffee, a pour-over, not an Americano, nothing that could spill. The water went through the grounds slowly, and the kitchen smelled like coffee instead of sesame oil, and that was fine. Not every smell has to be a memory. I opened the window. Portland gray came in, cool, damp, patient, the kind of air that doesn't demand anything from you, the kind that just arrives and waits. I am okay. That is not a small thing.